that's been all. It was established in 97, and what you call the Meet the Artist program has gone on. It was physically done in Bhubaneswar, but thereafter it's been online because of the COVID, and it's fortunately reaching out to a larger audience all over the world. And I'm very happy and lucky to have Jenny
Housego.
And I met her before. We have not met in recent past. I've also met Maya Mirchandani, and many eminent people have talked about it. This is frankly a beginning to continue the journey and the discussion, the discourse. So we're very lucky to have you. Kindly take over and speak about your journey with Indian craftsmen and weavers.
I'll do a brief introduction to Jenny. Jenny Housego thought as a child to be a spy. This is from your book, I think, Maya. So I'm reading it. But life had other plans. It brought her to the world of Asian textiles, art, and museums. And she has, over the last 5 decades, traveled across Asia with a passion to document traditional, local, and nomadic weaving and handcrafted textiles. Maya Mirchandani, in conversation with Jenny Housego, talks of her journey into textiles, her decision to settle in India, and her forays into the world of Indian textiles. Jenny, as she fondly is known, has helped inspire a generation of Indian craftspeople to raise their weaving skills to new heights of creativity and excellence. During her 2 decades in India, she has worked diligently with weavers and embroiderers to forge new ways of combining the traditional craftsmanship with contemporary designs. Jenny has revived ancient weaving techniques and simultaneously contributed to the livelihood of weavers' families, especially in Haryana and Kashmir. She is the author of Tribal Rugs, an introduction to the weaving of tribes of Iran, and of Bridal Durries of India. She has co-founded 2 successful textile brands in India, the Shades of India and Kashmir Loom. I personally, on a little footnote, I met Jenny through Laila Atayeb, who was a speaker earlier, about 1.5 years ago, and a dear friend of my father's. And it was the Kashmir Loom, I think the story for which I went to photograph to Kashmir. And I met Jenny and Asif very luckily. And I think I met them a bit too late in life. I would have loved to have met Jenny, I think, 2-3 decades earlier. But also, we had Jasleen Dhamija, which was lovely. And, Jenny, you and Jasleen go back such a long way, which I didn't know. I just knew that you were very good friends. But, you go back all the way to, the time in Iran that she spent, I think in the 50s or 60s. So thank you very much for being here. And introduction to you too, Maya. Maya Mirchandani is an award-winning Indian journalist with interest in Indian foreign policy, South Asia, and identity conflicts. And she's also the co-author of Jenny's memoirs, A Woven Life, published by Roli Books in 2020, for which Leila wrote the foreword. That's also lovely. Maya is an associate professor of media studies at Ashoka University. Thank you, Maya, for doing this for us. Thank you. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you all, and a very warm welcome to everybody who's tuning in to listen to this talk about Jenny's life and work. I am going to walk you all through, Jenny's history with a slideshow in a couple of minutes. But I think before that, Jenny's here with us, and I thought it would be nice to have her kick off this talk. Jenny, this is, as you know, a talk that you were supposed to originally give. You conned me into doing it for you.
That's right.
That's right. And this is meant to be about your life and work in India, your experience with Indian craftspeople. We're going to walk them through some of your book. But before that, I thought you might like to say a few words.
When I first came to India, I thought, my goodness, this is a strange place. It's going to take me some time to get my feet on the ground.
Sorry, Jenny, can you come a bit closer so you can hear?
Yeah, let's bring this closer to you. Yeah.
You don't want to miss any of Jenny's wit.
Yeah.
When I first came to India, I thought, my goodness, this is such a strange country. I couldn't put my feet on the ground. But very, very quickly, I found that my feet were firmly on the ground and I never wanted to leave it again. So that was a rather sort of strange start, but there we are. And here I still am, not going to leave again in a hurry, not going to leave again at home at all. I think I'm going to live and then pass away here. This is most definitely home now.
Well, I mean, as part of Jenny's journey making this home, I think the reason we're here today is the kind of work she's done with Indian craftspeople. But let me just give you a little background about Jenny's history and how she got into this. Bear with me for a moment. And please let me know if you can see my screen. If you can, just, all right, Siddharth, thank you so much. So we'll start by Jenny's early life and introduction to the textiles. She studied early Christian art at the Courtauld Institute of Art in London, and she was looking for work after she finished her education. She ended up doing voluntary work at the Guildhall Museum before she interviewed for the Victoria and Albert. And I know that when we were writing the book, Jenny, you said that in the Guildhall, you were dealing with ceramics which were full of cracks, and you didn't like anything that wasn't perfect. You didn't deal well with imperfection. Anyway, in the course of her looking for a job, she interviewed for the Victoria and Albert Museum and told them that she actually wanted to be a spy. Right?
That's right.
We're not quite sure why you thought you wanted to be a spy.
That was, yes, no, I thought I wanted to be a spy because I wanted to stand on the Berlin Wall and say stupid things to both sides.
Well, there you have it. So instead of saying stupid things to both sides, Jenny found herself in the circulation department of the Victoria and Albert Museum, bored to tears, trying to figure out how she was going to get out of there into maybe some ceramics or another arts section, and ended up sort of finding that there was a vacancy in the textile department. And because of that vacancy in the textile department, she was deputed to help Dr. May Beatty, who I think you worked with for quite some years after that. And May Beatty was a leading scholar of Oriental rugs and carpets at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and had begun working on a very major project to ascertain whether certain carpet fragments that the museum actually owned in its collection belonged to a particular shrine in Iran. And Jenny, of course, was taken under Dr. May Beatty's wing, developing her own passions, for rugs, for carpets, for textiles, and especially Persian textiles at that point in time. As luck would have it, Jenny, you ended up finding yourself in Tehran soon after you were married.
That's right.
Your husband was a journalist and he found himself on assignment in Iran.
That's right.
At the time. And so while she was in Iran, it was sort of fortuitous that you were able to match those fragments that May Beatty had given you, right?
To the shrine in Kerman in southern Iran.
To the shrine in Kerman.
And to my happiness, they all fitted.
And they all fitted, right.
It's like a detective story, it came true.
So that was Jenny's investigation encounter, the life of a spy determining whether the pieces of a rug actually matched the shrine.
That's right.
Right? Okay. Well, in Tehran, Jenny also encountered Jasleen Dhamija. Siddharth, you mentioned her in your introduction a short while ago. Jasleen Dhamija, who passed away recently, was one of our foremost textile historians, worked with a lot of craftspeople in the country, but she was working in Iran at the time on a handicraft project for the UN. And I think along with Jasleen and the Iranian sculptor and collector Parvez Tanavoli, am I saying the name correctly?
Yes.
You formed a rug society.
That's right.
In Tehran. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about how that rug society actually, how an English woman living in Tehran was going to tell the Iranians about their own textiles and their own rugs?
I didn't think about it. I just went ahead and did it. My usual determined way.
And what was the response from there?
They were delighted.
They were? Okay. Well, This is part of her travels in Tehran. Jenny actually traveled the length and breadth of Iran by road.
Yes,
Right? You went up and met tribal communities.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I'm determined to discover more about these tribes who wove these wonderful rugs, and why some of the designs from one area seem so like those in another.
Mm-hmm. And when did you have your first exhibition in the rug society that you formed? You said that you eliminated middlemen and you wanted to deal directly with the tribesmen of
That's
Iran.
right.
And you held an exhibition of horse blankets.
That's right.
Firstly, tell us, what is a horse blanket?
A horse blanket is a ceremonial thing. It hangs over a horse, and it's two front sides tied around the neck of the horse.
Mm-hmm. And what was so special about these 25 blankets?
Because they were so beautiful.
Can you describe them?
So unusual.
What was unusual about them?
Because they were like modern art.
They were like modern art. Okay. All right. Well, so I think the years in Iran were really sort of formative for Jenny, because it was not just her introduction into the rug as an art form, it was your introduction into sort of Asian cultures
Yes.
as well. Right? You sort of, Jenny is the quintessential Desi in many ways as well today. And I think it was that first sort of moving into Iran that acquainted you with Asian food, cultures, customs, traditions, etc.
Absolutely.
Right? What part about Asian customs really speaks to you even today?
I suppose it's textiles.
Mm-hmm.
Except I'm dismally upset that no one has really actually, what's the word I want? Documented them.
Documented the textiles. Right. So as you can see, I mean, this picture on your screen is a carpet that's being shown at a carpet bazaar in an Iranian village. Jenny used to travel, as I mentioned, all over these places and deal directly with the families and the weavers. This is Parvez Tanawuli. You said that you had set up the society with
Yes.
with Parvez and with Jasleen. And the fact is that I think when you look at the carpets of Iran and you look at the weaving traditions in India that you've kind of fostered and helped people along the way, do you see any similarities? Do you see any similarities in the two forms?
Not much.
Not much. Motifs, weaving techniques?
Not really, no.
No.
And the Iranian tribal ones were so special.
Mm-hmm. The Iranian tribal ones were so special. What about Indian rugs?
Well, they're special in their own way.
They're special in their own way. Okay. All right. Well,
But weaving today is nothing very exciting.
as it used to be. Okay. Well, Jenny also ended up setting up a museum in Dubai. She was asked to set up the museum there, located within the grounds of the Al Fahidi fort, because of all the exposure she had in Iran as well, and because of her education in London. These were sort of very, like I said, formative years. She was called back to the V&A to work with May Beatty as well on that rug from the Kerman Shrine.
That's right.
Right? Can you tell us a little bit about that exercise? What came out of that project?
Well, I gave a lecture that May Beatty organized in her home in Sheffield, in which I disgraced myself by fainting in the middle of it.
You fainted in the middle of your lecture?
I did.
And do you want to tell us why? Were you nervous?
Yes, I was terrified. It was very hot and I was wearing a very elegant, but very thick terran of some sort.
So for those of you who don't know Jenny personally, this is a little insight into her personality. Jenny can actually be quite, as witty as she can be quite shy too.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. So that's the Gemini in her, I suppose. Let's move on. This is the shops in Kerman selling carpets. Let's move on from the Iran pictures a bit. And this is the museum in Dubai that I was mentioning. It was set up within the grounds of the Al Fahidi Fort. It's still a very popular, highly visited museum in Dubai.
Apparently, yes.
And what did you do for the museum? What did they ask you to do for the museum?
When I was taken off to meet the Sheikh of Dubai. He said, make me a museum. And instead of saying stupidly, well, I don't know how to.
You need to speak into the computer, Jenny.
Instead of saying, well, I don't know how to, sorry, I won't. I thought, well, I'll jump into the deep end as I usually do. So I got hold of the V&A in London, and I said, please send me specifications of your showcases.
And what are the kinds of artifacts that you put in the museum? What did you curate for them?
Well, metalware, daggers, swords. There wasn't much else.
There wasn't much else? No. Okay. All right. Well, after Dubai, as we said, Jenny went back to London from Tehran and her excursions in Dubai, set up also a rug society in London, which you were working with.
That's right.
And worked with the museum with Dr. May Beatty before she moved to India for the same reasons that she ended up in Tehran, which is that you were sort of a trailing spouse when your husband had come on assignment.
That's right.
And you ended up in Delhi in 1988 and were trying to figure out what to do in the heat and dust of India.
That's right.
Right? But by now, like I said, Jenny had already developed this sort of knack for textiles, her interest in textiles, had also pursued her diploma in Paris in the interim, become a young mother with 2 little boys who were also tugging at her coattails while she was working with craftspeople and weavers. In Delhi, Jenny met Anne Shankar and worked with Anne Shankar on bridal durries in Punjab and Haryana, where Jenny discovered that A, of course, there was the language barrier, and B, it wasn't easy to get women in rural India to open up to a bunch of Gora women, right? How did you overcome that barrier?
Well, thankfully, Anne spoke very good Hindi.
Anne spoke very good Hindi?
She was married to an India.
And did they share stories with you? How did you get them to open up to you?
I don't know, they just did.
They just did.
They were so interested and so happy to have somebody share their craft with them.
And I think that's really, at the heart of how Jenny was able to get these women to participate, to work with her, because in the sort of gendered structures of Indian society, where women in these villages were sort of cast aside, they were working on their own, they were looking after home, family. The fact that these women had come in from outside, not just from the big city, but from outside the country, and took an interest in what they were doing, really became something that allowed them to open up. And in fact, I think you wrote a book with Anne Shankar on the Bridal Durries of India as well.
Of Iran.
Of Iran. No,
sorry.
the Bridal Durries of India. Yeah. Where you focused on the histories, origins of the designs of these durries, particularly in Punjab and Haryana. This is the cover of that book that Jenny wrote with Anne Shankar. It was published in 1997. And Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about the rug on the cover of the book? What is this motif?
Just delicious.
Well, yes, of course, but what does it signify?
Man on a horse.
And was there a reason for it?
I don't think so.
No? Did they tell you why they thought of certain motifs?
No, not of this.
Okay, well, maybe something will come back to her.
It just came into their heads, I think.
This was, of course, also happening at a time when, India was beginning to showcase itself in the rest of the world. The festivals of India were taking place across. There was a push towards sending out Indian textiles, handicrafts, things like that. And it was around this time where Jenny and her former husband David set up Shades of India. They were not ready to leave India, of course, and as I said, at that point in time, there was a push from the government also to promote Indian handicrafts and Indian textiles. And what Jenny did was essentially, at a time when the Indian manufacturing and a textile base was opening up, she provided a European / Western aesthetic, design aesthetic, to some of the products that were going out. And one of the things that they started with was what they called patti ka kaam, which is sort of a fine applique work, which
on organdy.
On organdy, which they had discovered in Rampur in Uttar Pradesh. There was, they'd come across local market stalls where the women were sewing organdy applique, sewing motifs of applique onto organdy fabric.
Organdy, I should explain, is a cotton fabric that is stiffened, which makes it a bit sort of crunchy and hard.
Right. So this fabric, the samples of these, Jenny decided to show to a French designer, and they started working on an entire collection of home furnishings.
That's right.
With some of this work. And that's how Shades of India got its first order?
That's how we took part in a trade fair in Paris.
Okay, you took part in a trade fair in Paris. And how was the work received?
And people came and said, "What? This is made in India?" So I said, "Yes, of course it's made in India. Where else would it be made?" Rather crossly. And we started to get huge orders.
From France?
In France, and from a man in Belgium.
Okay. And what were these orders for?
For curtains, for bed covers, for cushions.
So primarily for home furnishings?
Yes, entirely for home furnishings.
Entirely for home furnishings. And I think here is what it's important to note, that the families in Rampur were just a handful doing this work. And that's what prompted Jenny to seek out, other ways of sourcing the same kind of work. So this is when they set up workshops in Kerala, in Haryana, where they started teaching the women themselves how to do this work. The younger generation, as we've seen with so many of our handicrafts and textile traditions, the younger generation was just not interested in pursuing this. So it was imperative that they find a way to continue promoting these crafts. So the workshops, as I said, in Haryana was set up to preserve patti ka kaam and to teach the women how to sew as well. From there, of course, begins the Kashmir Loom journey. This is the team at Kashmir Loom that you can see from left to right. There's Majid, Samina, Hamid, Jenny, Asif, and Zahid. So Asif, Zahid, and Hamid are brothers. They look after the design, the manufacturing, and the marketing of Kashmir Loom. And of course, while Jenny was in Delhi is when she met Asif, while you were exploring Persian carpets that were available in the Indian market. Right. And in 1999, after Shades of India had been established, you wanted a new direction. So you wanted to move towards shawls.
I wanted a new direction.
New direction. And what Jenny has written in the book is that she wanted to sort of include shawls in her collection, and she had met Asif earlier. So she contacted him to say that she wanted to replicate something she had seen from an NID intern in Kashmir.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about that. It was about incorporating metallic yarn in the shawl.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us?
This NID intern was extremely talented. And she had suggested it.
She had suggested it. So what had she suggested exactly?
Make the curtains.
So I took some metallic yarn, which I'd got from Shades, off to Kashmir, and I said to one of our big weavers, now listen, can you weave this? He said, of course, absolutely impossible.
He said it was impossible.
He did.
And then what did you do?
I said, please, will you just try? He said, well, I'll try, but I can't promise any good result.
And then what happened?
And then I went back some little time later, and he'd done it, and it was wonderful.
So on this, if I can, I mean, maybe I should just read a little excerpt from Jenny's book on this metallic yarn that Jenny had gone off to find in Kashmir. Let me just see.
No, I brought it from Shades of India.
You had brought it from Shades of India, and this is Haji Sahab who had done the metallic weaving?
One of the workshops.
Right, okay. So did they do it on a plain shawl, or did they do it with designs?
On pashmina. In designs.
Okay. So I'll just read a little bit about Jenny's first trip to Kashmir for the audience over here. This was, I think, this was around 1999 or early 2000. On days when we had to wait for weavers to show us what they had made, Asif would step outside in the afternoon to play volleyball in the park in front of the house. I would borrow a burqa from his mother, take his young nephew Rashid along, and set off on long walks to discover the city. To Imambara, Zaidabad, sometimes down to the banks of a large rivulet not far from the house, to a shrine called Madin Sahab. It looked like a river, but in fact, it's just a small stream that runs from the Jhelum into the city. At bedtime, I was given a mattress to put on the floor and a cover to use in case it got chilly at night. It was the first time I had ever slept on the floor. I remember falling into a deep sleep, wondering how I had ended up here. And I think the answer to how Jenny had ended up here was really her love for the Kashmiri shawl and the textiles as well. So the metallic yarn that she tried to convince the weavers to make, it's been sort of refined over the years. It's been added to in terms of designs, and it continues to remain one of Kashmir Loom's most popular products that you continue to export. It continues to be sold everywhere, right? I think the real story of Kashmir Loom also comes through what is popularly known as the sergeant shawl. And again, on this, I'd marked a little excerpt, and I'm going to try and see if I can find it and read from it. Just a moment, give me here we go. I had been looking through books to find illustrations and designs for antique shawls since we had started Kashmir Loom. With a start of recognition, I realized that my great uncle and famous painter, John Singer Sargent, and I'm trying to look for the painting that we have here. This is the Sargent shawl. I realized that my great uncle and famous painter, John Singer Sargent, had actually painted one particular shawl in several of his paintings. I sent an image to Warren Adelson, a friend and well-known art dealer in New York, who specialized in Sargent paintings. For those who don't know, John Singer Sargent was a very, very well-known American impressionist, and his paintings are hung all over the biggest museums in Europe and America. I asked if Mr. Adelson had any idea if the shawl he had painted still existed. The original painting had been sold to a private collector, and Adelson had negotiated that sale too. To my utter surprise, he said he knew exactly where it was, owned by a British peer, and you're going to have to help me out with the spelling. Lord
Cholmondeley.
Cholmondeley. Is that how you say it?
It's spelled Cholmondeley. That's it's pronounced Cholmondeley.
Right, Lord Cholmondeley, and kept in an old English stately home. Presumably, Sargent must have painted an ancestor of the Lord's wife with the shawl wrapped around her, and then must have given it to her. Warren wrote to him on my behalf, and his lordship kindly agreed to bring it to London for me to see. In the hallway of his Mayfair home on a cold, dark, rainy day, the shawl was brought to me and placed on a table. The hallway was badly lit, and no one offered to hold it up for me to photograph properly. I remember draping it over a side table as well as I could, and then my flash failed. The wool was coarse, clearly woven from local sheep, not pashmina at all, but the shawl was exquisite in spite of the rough wool. It had been looked after well. Woven using the technique called kani, for which Kashmir is renowned, it had patterns on a large border, and on either side of the shawl were big paisleys in shades of blue with accents of reds and pinks. Each paisley was made up of tiny leaves and flowers woven to form the shape. Above the main border was another row of much smaller paisleys, woven the same way but set at an angle slanting to the right. The outer border at the very end of the paisleys wrapped around the entire shawl like a vine of tiny blue-green leaves. Bent over in that dark hallway, I knew I had to try and recreate it. I didn't know if it would work, but I was certain it would become Kashmir's Loom's signature if it did. Asif was excited about the idea, but apprehensive. The years of violence in Kashmir had all but eliminated innovation in crafts, and Kani weaving was painstaking and time consuming. While staying indoors under curfew meant artisans had all the time in the world, Kani was also expensive, and in those years, honest, hard earned money was not easy to come by. Muhammad Maqbool Sheikh's house in downtown Srinagar was nicer than those of many of his neighbors. It was not fancy, but very old and stately, standing proof of what clearly had been better times before the militancy had begun. When I met him for the first time, Maqbool, the best weaver of Kani shawls in Kashmir Valley, was clicking away at the 3 looms on the top floor of his 3-story house, and that could be heard all the way downstairs. In fact, as soon as one walked in through the gates into a small garden bursting with flowers in every color one could imagine. Kani weaving had been his family's craft for generations. It's a highly complex weaving technique in which wooden spindles are wrapped in thread of many different colors and brought in as and where the pattern demands. In fact, the word Kani means small wooden sticks. Talim is the Urdu for learning or education, but for Kani weavers, Talim is the symbol of colors and numbers read out by the weaver himself. The Talim, a sort of coded shorthand, is based on a painstakingly drawn out graph that converts the most intricate patterns into numbers and squares to guide the weavers as they go along, weaving the colored threads into the weft. The tradition of the talim comes from carpet weaving, which uses knots instead of a wooden needle, unlike embroidery. Artisans trace a pattern on the fabric and work over it. Kani weaving requires much more skill than any other type, a basic knowledge of math, and an even greater amount of concentration. The finest museums across the world display the Kani in their textile exhibitions with pride. It was not just my great-uncle Sargent who painted women draped in the Kani. Even the Louvre houses a portrait of Empress Josephine draped in one. Portraits of several aristocratic European women in Kani shawls from Kashmir dot museums around the continent. The stunningly beautiful weaves were a sign of wealth and power. After all, a single shawl could take over a year to weave. I had never met Maqbool before this, and in fact, neither had Asif. We had been introduced through a contact of his brother Hamid. He was in his late 40s. He greeted us with a wide smile and the kindest face I have ever seen. The sound of the clacking from the looms excited me. I could sense the seeds of something big and bold germinating. When I showed him the photographs of the shawl and the books with the paintings, Maqbool's face lit up. He sensed and shared my excitement, and without blinking, said he would absolutely take this project up. Even though I wasn't quite sure of how it would turn out, Maqbool would have none of my doubts. And it was the Sargent project that took us deeply into the revival of Kani weaving. So as you can see, this is the modern version of the Kani shawl on your slide. It has been exhibited in museums around the world. It was most recently in Houston, I believe. It's been exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And like I said, everywhere around the world. There's a limited number of pieces that are made. and it continues to be the signature of Kashmir Loom. This is a photograph of Jenny and Asif at the store in Delhi. For those of you who haven't been there, I'm going to stop sharing this screen. But I mean, like I said, this is basically Jenny's story. And Jenny, you know, the fact that the sergeant shawl is now almost 15 years old, if not older than that, 20 years old, some 15 years old, right? Do you have thoughts about what next? Because with the Kani shawl and with the revival of weaving, I think there's a lot of weavers around, whether it's Haryana, whether it's Kashmir, who sort of remember you and say that it was you who kind of pushed them back into doing the work that they wouldn't have considered doing anymore.
I simply
You
don't
need to
know.
look there and speak louder.
I simply do not know what's next, if anything.
What next for Kashmir Loom?
I don't know. Many things.
Many things. So I think
don't know. I wish I knew, but I don't.
do you have any more thoughts of designs? What's the next ambition? I know that Kashmir Loom is now exporting everywhere around the world. How much do you think you are still involved with the work that the weavers do on a regular basis? I know you and I, in the last few years, we sat and we drew lots of motifs and played around with a lot of color. That was a few years ago. But since then, have you been able to go back to design, to color, to writing?
Yes, I have,
Anything specific?
but not really to design.
So what have you gone back to?
What?
Have you been going back to Kashmir and meeting the weavers?
Yes, of course.
So tell us a little bit about that. Tell everyone about your interaction with the weavers even today. You go to Kashmir every summer.
More or less, yes.
So what do you do when you go and spend a month over there?
I go and see all the weavers.
And what do you talk about? What do they ask you?
What are we doing? What should they do next?
And what do you tell them? What do you tell them?
I tell them that I'm so thrilled with their talent and what they've done.
So
And they
Kashmir,
seem to love me.
well, everybody loves you. I think that goes without saying. Do you sit with Zahid in the office in Srinagar
Yes.
and work on designs?
Yes, yes.
So what are the challenges that come up? Tell us a little bit. I think the audience is interested in hearing from you, not from me.
Well, I think the challenges of working with Zahid. I think some of the what's the word? Challenges come from working with Zahid.
Some of the challenges come from working with Zahid. And I mean, I think
He's brilliant.
it's important for the
But
audience.
he's very, very obstinate.
Is it important for the audience to know that irrespective of what's happened, what's been going on in Kashmir, for those of you who don't know, Jenny's son was kidnapped in Kashmir way back when as well, but it still didn't deter her from going back and working
Not-
in the valley,
Certainly not.
right? With the weavers.
Yes.
Were you ever afraid?
No.
Never. I think that's the spy in Jenny. She's never afraid of anything, right?
No, I was not afraid, was I?
Do you ever miss England, Jenny? Do you ever miss
Never.
going back?
Never.
No, never?
So boring.
Boring.
Whereas here it's such fun. People are friendly and amusing.
So, I think we're gonna stop the conversation with Jenny over there and maybe take some Q&A from the audience. Siddharth, you might like to kick off some as well while they warm up. I know that some people have put in comments saying they couldn't hear her clearly. If there's something they'd like me to repeat, I'm happy to do that. But perhaps we can take it from there.
Yeah. So thank you very much for this. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people who have lots of questions. And just to start off, I think Jenny's had such an incredible trajectory, coming from an Irish family, coming to England to study, then going to Paris, then going to Iran, then coming to India. I mean, it's a stuff of dreams, I think, for many. And along the way, starting all of these enterprises and writing these lovely books. And I think you said something about design and things. I think when I remember working on the Threads and Voices book that Leila Taibji had put together, and the reason for, and that's how I met Jenny. What was lovely was when I went to Srinagar and went to a lot of the embroiderers to meet, to document for the book. They all had such love for Jenny, and it was really lovely. And what was exciting was that they had a whole generation of young women who were doing, because it's actually, I didn't realize it was a male preserve, the embroidery work in Kashmir. So that was quite fascinating. And they would say that it was because of Jenny's coaxing, and I think persuasion that they all took to it. I think convincing the families also to let them do that. So that was very exciting. And I think often, like, I know, being a designer myself, I feel design is the easy part. I think working with people and communities and making them feel like a shared common future is very exciting.
Let me add that I'm not a designer. I can't draw.
Yeah, so
I can pick up the ideas. I'm good with colors, but designing itself, I can't. I'm hopeless.
I think the point he's making, Jenny, is that when it's not just the design and not just the product, but actually getting people to invest themselves
Absolutely.
and their effort. So
I've been terribly lucky in this way. I seem to have inspired so many people.
Completely. They all had a picture of you. And they were, because of you, I got fantastic food when I went to meet them. They would say, oh, I don't know what they called you. I forgot, Jenny. And there's a word they would add to it. I can't remember, but they were just so happy. And I would have this amazing spread of meals.
Because of me.
Yeah, because I was documenting the work that you had been doing. So that's why.
So if I can ask you, on your first visit to the weavers, how did you respond to them and they respond to you? Because you don't speak the language. And I know that you had people there to help translate,
I had
etc.
Asif.
But how did you convince them to do what you wanted them to do?
I don't know. Just determination.
What do you think they thought? What do you think must have gone through their head when they saw
They
you?
must have thought, who is this extraordinarily bossy foreign lady?
And she can still be sometimes quite bossy too. So, right, Jenny?
Maya would know.
There's a question for Jenny from Joya Roy that's come to me directly, but it's in the chat box. And if people don't want to ask a question directly, if you put them in the chat box, I'm happy to ask Jenny on your behalf. She's asking you, Jenny, what colors or dyes do the weavers use in the Kani shawl? Are there any traditional dyes that they continue to use, or is it all chemical? What kind of dyes do they
No,
use?
that's no more natural dyes.
We are going to do that as of
We do azo-free dyes.
What free dyes?
Azo-free.
What does that mean?
It's a journal which has less chemicals.
So you don't, so are they don't, the weavers no longer really use natural
No.
dyes. Is it because they're expensive or they're hard to come by or they don't last as long?
There is no documentation that we are going to begin. We have already begun.
Asif is also sitting on the side and helping us answer some of these questions to say that they've already begun working on reviving some natural dyes. And right now what they're doing is using either zero chemical or low chemical dyes through some German technology. Is that correct, Asif?
It's a German dyes, yes. It's called azo-free dyes.
Azo-free dyes, right. Okay. Jenny, do you want to add to this?
I think I have been incredibly lucky with all the help I have received.
Jenny tried to see natural dye documentation. There wasn't much. Now we are doing outsourcing.
Right. Okay. So I don't know if that answers your question on the dyes. Is there anything else related to color? I think what's interesting, Jenny, what do you think? Okay, let me ask you this question. The shawls that you gravitate towards, the colors and the motifs are I guess traditional in many ways, but the colors you play around with, there's a sensibility which is in keeping with the colors of the season or pastels, which is very unusual for this part of the world.
I just have it.
So what did you think about, like when you went into Haryana, for example, and worked with the women in Kerala, and they were wearing, or in Punjab, when you saw their durries, they were wearing all these bright colors. I mean, you know, the yellows and the hot pinks and the greens and the reds all together. What did you think of that kind of aesthetic and that
I thought, this is
sensibility?
wonderful.
Yeah.
Mm.
But why do you think it wouldn't do that aesthetic wouldn't do well, or how would it do in a European or a global
It
market?
just wouldn't,
Why not?
because they don't go into
You need
it.
to speak into that.
Because they don't really go into those sort of colours. Not for their home fit, or they didn't at the time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They didn't at the time.
They didn't at the time.
Mm.
The other sort of interesting thing, and this was documented in Jenny's book as well, is how in the 90s, the late 80s and the 90s, there was actually a whole bunch of Westerners who had made India their home, who worked on developing textiles.
They did, yeah.
The textiles and different handicrafts.
Mm.
What is it that attracted you, not you individually, but you all as a group, you think? You all get along well, you know each other well.
I think we all fell in love with India.
And needed to look for a way to stay on?
Yes, probably. That's a very difficult question to answer.
Okay.
I have a question to ask.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Has Jenny worked in any other part of India with the weavers, like Ikat in Gujarat, or Ikat
Yes.
in Orissa, Ikat in
In
Andhra?
Kolkata.
Gujarat.
In Gujarat and in Kolkata.
And what kind of work did you do there?
Kolkata, we made silks.
Sorry, in Calcutta, we made silk scarves.
And did you work with any ikat weavers?
No,
No?
I would like to have done because I love ikat.
And in Gujarat, what did you do?
She did Ajrak, Mama.
A lot of my ajrak.
In Gujarat, she's worked with ajrak, but that's like printing,
Block printed natural dyes.
Yeah, in natural
in
dyes,
Kutch.
right? So, what is there a tradition of textile in India that you like more than others, or you think is more refined than others?
Gujarat,
What about Gujarat's
No doubt.
textiles? No doubt.
old ancient designs
Mm-hmm.
and wonderful colours.
And a refined skill
Very refined skill.
more than other parts of the country?
Yes.
No, I don't agree.
Very contentious.
Okay. Okay, come on, Jatin, say what you think.
There are more tie and dye or applique in Rajasthan and Gujarat. They're very bright colors because of the desert. But the weaving in southern India and Orissa is much more refined. In Ikat.
I think
Andhra.
Gujarat the weaving would be only the patola, which will be very, which is a very complex one. But I think Gujarat has more of embroidered and block printed fabrics. And I think the
And
southern
dyed up.
India has a lot of, I think probably a large variety of woven textile. Probably in variety, probably.
Southern and Eastern India. Southern and Eastern India. Much more.
I don't disagree with you.
I have a little collection for the JD Center of Art. It's wonderful what you said and your dedication in India, especially in Kashmir.
I need something new now. I'll come and work with you, Jatin.
I want you to visit my studio one day.
I will, with great pleasure.
It would be lovely. And returning back to weaving, did you work at all with Pupul Jaikar when she had the Handicraft and Loom Export Corporation?
She passed away just before I got to India.
Or Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay?
I knew her.
No, much later. That's much.
They were all before my time,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
They were all before your time.
They were.
Are there
Right.
any questions that anyone else would like to ask? Anyone, please go ahead. I can see a lot of people who you know Jenny quite well. And there are others who also would love to know, I think, from textile and other milieux, from architecture, textiles, a whole bunch of people there. Would anyone like to ask? Please feel free to ask. And if you don't, then I'll have to threaten that I will. So, yeah. I can see Paola Manfredi is also here. I don't want to put you in the spot. So,
No, in the meanwhile, I was just thinking, the bit where we talked about the women in Haryana and Punjab, I can just read out a little passage, of how I think she began to engage with them, she and Anne Shankar. I think that's quite interesting as well. So if there's no objection, I can do that, right? Is that okay?
yes, please.
Okay, all right. India had its own traditions of weaving, and Anne Shankar, whom I had first met in London a few years earlier, asked me if I would like to join her on a project on dharis from central Punjab. Woven by local women as part of their bridal trousseaux, Anne was married to an Indian bureaucrat who was posted to Chandigarh, the capital of both Punjab and the neighboring state of Haryana at the time. Punjab had been partitioned twice over, first during partition of India in 1947 when Pakistan got territories from the western part of the state, and then again in 1966 when Hindi-speaking areas of the state were separated to create the new state of Haryana. Ever since we had left Iran, my field work had come to a virtual standstill, and Anne provided the catalyst to resume it with her offer. It was my first experience on Indian roads. They were worse than anything I had ever traveled on before. The roads were barely 2 lanes wide, packed with traffic coming headlong from the opposite direction, forcing me to shut my eyes and wait for certain death. But as I have now learned, our driver then, like so many others on Indian roads, was adept at surviving such daily nightmares. Even though women are generally reluctant to part with their bridal treasures, which is why they were so little known to the outside world, they were delighted to share their craft with 2 English women entering their homes. And as we learned quickly, the designs on these dharis, wild and colorful, either with stylized animals and flowers or geometrically patterned, went way back in history. The women treasured these dharis, which they spread on the rough rope string webbing of charpais, the traditional Indian bed so central to village homes. Anne used photographs from our various strips and cross-referenced them with texts on archaeology and history and shards of pottery and stone that had found their way to libraries and museums, and decided to follow the trail into the earliest mythological tales from India, as well as some patterns that seemed to represent legends that had been passed down for generations. As Anne focused on the history and origin of the designs on the dharis, I decided to continue with the field work in neighboring Haryana, which had the same tradition of dhari weaving. And this is when we decided we had enough material for a book. I had attended a lecture in archaeology given by 2 eminent archaeologists from Cambridge at Delhi's India International Center, where a young man from Kurukshetra happened to sit next to me. When we began chatting, he told me he lived in Kurukshetra, dusty Haryana town, better known as the mythological battlefield in the Mahabharata. As we talked, he offered to be my local guide, and before I knew it, I was on a train to Kurukshetra, armed with my camera and notebook once again. Vicky was at the station to meet me as promised and took me home. His father, a recently retired professor of philosophy at the university there, and we set off from his house with a known taxi driver. By now, I had become more accustomed to the chaos on Indian roads. Right, Jenny?
Very good, yes.
There's a comment from Manisha Ahmed. She's signed on. Hello, Manisha. Thank
Hello,
you,
Manisha,
Jenny.
where are you?
She's written a comment. Thank you, Jenny, for sharing your amazing life, a great inspiration for all of us, she says.
Manisha, you are lovely. I love you so much.
Yes, so please, any more questions for Jenny? Because I think she's been here for an hour and now getting a bit tired as well. So do let us know if there are any questions from the audience. Otherwise, Siddharth, in case you have any further comments or questions as well.
We were actually hoping for Manisha to be a speaker too. So hopefully,
all right,
under the Ladakhi nomadic textiles, to speak later at some point.
Come on, Manisha, where are you?
She's hidden. anyone, please, all of you, please feel free to ask, and please, you can switch on your videos if you'd like. So to see, because I think in Kashmir Loom now there's a lot more, I think in many ways the Kashmiri textiles were the things, and especially Pashmina was central to all its things, but it has got a lot of variety now of other woven textiles too. So what kind of spurred that move, and how did that happen?
Sorry, say that again.
So I'm saying this in the Kashmir Loom, the kind of bouquet of all the textiles that comes out now, there's a lot of variety also. Initially, there was, the main theme was embroidered textiles, which were largely Pashmina from Kashmir. And then it has kind of branched off into other domains. What brought that on?
How have you've sort of moved from the more traditional Sozni, Kani to other forms of weaving your shawls as well, more contemporary designs? So he wants to know, and fabrics, how did you move on? How did you make that decision?
It's so obvious, there's nothing else to do. You can't go on and on with the same things. You have to change and go forward.
Because Jane is looking at her kids, blind kids.
So, and it's not just the shawl, Jenny. You've also, you've gone into garments, you've done...
Well, capes, not stitched garments. We've gone into capes, as well as shawls, blankets, throws.
Now some garments.
And how do these other products do well in terms of your bouquet of products that you have?
They're
Which
doing
ones
very
do
well.
better? Do the shawls still do the best, or are there others that do better?
Others also.
I said, why don't you join into this conversation?
Others also do.
I have another question. So in the time that you spent in Kashmir, were you also looking at reviving a lot of the historical pieces and, you know, kind of making a lexicon of the kind of embroidery patterns there were?
Yes,
Yes. We have revived lots of Kani.
we've revived lots of Kani.
Oh, lovely.
I have to say, I'm not so interested in embroidery.
You like Kanis.
I like Kanis.
Is there a particular motif you like better than others?
Simple, early designs.
I think more simple early designs.
For example,
18th century.
I mean, of like flower booties or paisleys or
Not paisleys.
not paisleys. Why is the paisley so popular in Europe?
God knows.
Okay. Jenny, there's some more comments. I'm going to read them out. Jayashri, Catherine Cunningham says she's been fascinated. Jayashri Podar says it's fascinating to see Jenny talk about her experiences. Rehan Chaudhary, your book, Jenny, sounds and seems to be highly interesting. It reminded me greatly of my mother, a textile designer and vocational educationist, however, proudly calling herself a weaver first. Please, by all means, make these comments, and she'd like to see the people who are putting these comments there as well. She can't read, so I'm reading them out for her. It would really be nice if you put your cameras on, put your microphones on, and spoke to Jenny directly.
I would love that. Justin, stop laughing.
There, we can see Manisha's put her camera on.
Where's Manisha? Oh, there you are, Manisha Ahmed. It's a very great pleasure to see you.
Hi, Jenny.
How are you, my dear?
I'm good. How are you? It was lovely.
good.
Thank you, Maya. It was great to hear the way you did it with Jenny. Yeah.
Thank you.
If any of you have questions, please feel free. I think Joy Roy, you had a question. Manisha, you must have, I mean, you would have known Jenny for such a long time also. And I think also that geographically, your areas of interest overlap so well.
Yeah.
And Asif has joined us for any questions on Kashmir Loom. I think we can direct them to him now.
Yes. Oh, Zahid too.
That too. Great.
So I think Asif, maybe you can talk a little bit about the
One second.
We're echoing in your computer. Hold
I
on.
have to move.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I said we can ask you about the chemical dyes that they were talking about, the changes in designs from the more traditional to more contemporary, the choice of colors that Kashmir Loom often uses in its shawls. There's a sensibility which is perhaps European, I think people would like to say. Tell us a little bit about these choices.
Yes, no, that's a very good question. Actually, you unmute, I will talk. I think we are trying to. Jenny had a great interest to see what are the natural dyes. Even Zahid, we all looked in it when we worked initially. Then Samina joined us. We all looked into it. We are a great, but we didn't find much documentation to Kashmir in terms of the dyes. So although we tried with Zahid had a friend who was a dyer. His name was Khurshid. He was very educated, very nice, and he still works with us now, although he does IT now. But we tried couple of colors. We had a client from Japan who made us do, but they were not very perfect in a way we could do the shawls and then sell it international market. But then we found this, which is called azo-free dyes, which is basically a dyes you buy. It's a German made, which have less chemicals. So we are recently, Sapna, my colleague also, she joined us 4 years. So we have found some sources where we are getting our yarns dye in natural dyes. And in fact, we have recently did a sample of Akani. So hopefully, inshallah, soon we should come up with a very nice natural dye kanis. So that is something we have been working last. Jenny is one of the dreams. So the second question is about the colors. Yes, it is true. Kashmir Loom has been different. What normally you see the colors in market and other people. Because Janie's sensibility of the color was God gift, and because she had traveled, seen shades, international market, so she wanted to make shawls and things which will appeal more internationally rather than obviously we have in our country a big market that is not to deny, and people understand here the shawls, embroidery, and other things. But we wanted a bigger market, long-term sustainability for our weavers. Therefore, it was important to make them such as so that appeal to the international market in terms of design, in terms of aesthetics, in terms of color. So we also seek a lot of help from the trends in books, and we traveled a lot. And when Samina and I was traveling into Paris after Janie's stroke, so we used to get lots of books and things and give it back to Zahid. We worked as team. Now, obviously, we have also get trend books and things, but it is rather was a Janie's idea which has embedded in our minds that we have to do different colors. So that is something which I guess we got slowly we have learned. We are still in learning, but it's 18 years, so we gone better on it. So I would say that's, and as you said, the third question which you were asking, Janie, about the variety of the products. You see, we have one of the things I understood last 18 years, that there is sometimes it's difficult when you have viewers. You have to constantly keep them occupied and give them work. Therefore, you have to consume this amount of cashmere shawls. And being our country in India here, a hot country, not seasons are short. So you have to have international markets. Therefore, we thought we will do some experiment which went very well. We did a lot of yardages. We created some gilets. We created recently we created a Pashmina ferens. We had some chogas, and we created blankets, which was Janie's bright idea. I remember when she told Kashmir in a weaver, let's make the yarn thick. In Kashmir, they never make thick pashmina. They thought that was a quality bad in a way. But we did a lot of, absolutely. So we did throws, blankets. That actually it gives a more space, and we can consume more fabric, and we can use weavers, we can constantly generate work. So that is the idea behind that.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Asif,
Asif,
for
for that. Okay, if you put yours on. Jenny, Manisha has a question for you, which is that you started your career in a museum. Do you ever think you'll set up a museum of your own?
Never.
Why not?
Never occurred to me. I
Okay.
was extremely young.
Based on your own collection of textiles, you have a beautiful collection yourself.
Yes, we do.
So for a museum, maybe?
Maybe.
Who's going to help you?
I don't know. You.
No, well, okay. We'll talk about that later, perhaps.
No, one day, inshallah, it's one of my dreams that we should set up a resource center in Kashmir. I think it will be in the name of Jenny. So Monisha, I am persuading her to do a museum in Ladakh. I've been after her. She's the great one to do museum, but we might, inshallah, if God willing, we do have few things. I have a great desire that we should make a resource center in Kashmir where we could have collections, books, other things, so that people come, they interact and do other things in terms of designs and other things. It will be good. So hopefully one day we'll see.
Okay. Siddharth, I think, that kind of brings us to a close for today, from Jenny's end at least. But if there are other comments, questions, I know that your talk is for another few more minutes, but Jenny, would you like to say something? You had about 30 people listen to the story of your life.
I thank you all for taking such an interest. That's where my voice is going.
Only thing I would like to say, the government and the public should join hands and make different kind of small art centers. Talking about Kashmir.
I'm shaking your hand.
Sorry?
I'm shaking your hand.
Entirely. So she's shaking your hand, she said.
Yeah. About 45 years ago in Kashmir, I had gone to an artist camp. And before that, when Ghulam Rasul Santosh had organized, and we met many senior government officials, and we suggested some of the period buildings should be converted into museums. And I don't like the word museum, but as art center. And it's unfortunate, in many parts of India, many of these arts and crafts and weaving will disappear, and they have not enough art centers. And that should be considered. In talking about Jenny, we start with in Kashmir. And sorry?
She agrees entirely, she said. Yes.
But the government and the public have to join hand with the craftsmen and the weavers.
Well, maybe they will. We don't know. We'll see.
We'll have to hope so.
We'll have to hope so. Anyway, thank you all so much for being a part of this evening with Jenny. I know she was very excited about this talk and was very keen to pull out all kinds of photographs, which we used, and we showed to everyone who's attending. Thank you all.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And do join in on every second Saturday at 5 p.m. for talks like these. And thank you again, Maya, for doing this. And thank you very much, Jenny. And I hope at least there'll be a book. I think a museum and art center is a very tall ask, but a book would be quite lovely. An insight into, your things. Yeah, well, not a biography, not the biography only, but I'm saying an insight into, the Pashmina textiles of Kashmir, because that entire trajectory, I think that'll be fantastic. So thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. And do remember that this is available on YouTube, so you can please share the link with your friends, and a lot of people see it later on. So it'll be lovely for them to see this and hear about your trajectory. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And I think a final comment for Jenny before we go from Chakshu Tomar. Dear Jenny, thank you so much for sharing your experiences I am a textile design student. The book Bridal Durries of India became a catalyst of an inspiration for me to major in flat woven rugs and tapestry. I'm truly honored. So that's nice. That's a all right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Very kind. Very